Good morning. Thanks, Kirby. Thanks for the introduction. I appreciate it. Great to be here with you guys today. Thank you to Garfield County for hosting us, and Colorado Mesa's Unconventional Energy Center and all the sponsors. Again, couldn't do it without you all. First, just because I'm new, I was appointed last June to the executive director position. I'm going to talk a little bit about where I come from and how I approach natural resource management, and then I'll get on to some issues. So just basic demographics. I've been at DNR since 2007. I was deputy director for 6 years, and like I say, was appointed by Governor Hickenlooper as executive director last June. Before that, I was an attorney practicing natural resources and environmental law, 8 years in Alaska, and then 3 or 4 years here, all focused on public lands and energy work. So that's what I brought to the department. During my time at DNR, during the 9 years, I've been really proud of all that we've gotten done and all that we've accomplished. And our work really has been marked by a handful of elements that I just want to name because I think it's useful for us to describe what's important to us. First, we try really hard to have active engagement with our stakeholders across the spectrum. We really do seek out input from a broad spectrum. We are adaptable to changing circumstances. We want to address concerns as they arise. We seek to make fact-based decisions. We think that that's important to good government. We encourage and reward innovation, and we ensure that our folks have adequate resources to do the job that they need to do on behalf of all Coloradans. And then finally, we seek to build strong support for our goals and how we're going to fulfill them. That's how we think natural resource policy decisions can be more enduring. So that's, again, just a little bit about me and what I bring as sort of management philosophy. So a couple of things about my remarks. First, because Matt Lepore is here, the director of the Oil and Gas Commission, I'm going to keep my remarks more general. And then second, because you guys get to ask questions at the end of this, I'm going to spend some time talking about what's on my mind, because then I'll get to hear later about what's on your mind about anything that the department does. So my sense is that the points of intersection between local government and energy companies and the department generally fall into 3 areas: Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, water, and often wildlife. So those are the 3 topics I'm going to address. And critical to running the department, we have about 1,500 employees across the state, is ensuring sufficient funding. So I'm going to talk about a few matters in that regard concerning the state budget and DNR's budget in particular. So first priority area that I'm going to talk about is just declining mineral revenues. Again, I think this is something that you all are very, very familiar with and deal with frequently. And those fall into 2 categories: severance tax and mill levy. So first, severance tax is a tax on minerals as they are severed from the earth, just like it sounds. It was created in the mid-1990s and reflects a handful of principles that a portion of severance tax should be held in trust as a replacement for the depletion of state resources, that revenues should be used to mitigate the impacts of development and to plan for future development, and that a portion should be available to local government to offset those impacts. All mineral production in Colorado, with just a few exceptions, contributes to severance tax, but it's important to note that oil and gas contributes about 95% of severance tax revenues statewide. Those revenues have been down in the last couple of years from a variety of factors. First, historically low oil and gas prices, a reduction in new drilling that's resulted from the price environment, new deductions allowed by the Colorado Supreme Court in the BP decision last year, and then the ad valorem offset, which is the property tax credit, where deductions are taken 2 years after the investments are made and the tax liabilities incurred. So our revenue stream is extraordinarily volatile when it comes to severance tax. Even without those historic events. In the last decade, severance tax revenue to the state has ranged from a high of $319 million to just $67 million last year. So again, wild fluctuations in the severance tax revenue stream. DNR's, the Department of Natural Resources gets half of every severance tax dollar that comes into the state, so 50 cents out of every dollar. That's split evenly between 2 funds that we administer. One is the Perpetual Base Account, which provides low-interest loans to water providers, ditch companies, and others to meet our water infrastructure needs. And the second is called the Operational Account that funds personnel and operations at the department through what's called Tier 1, and then a number of programs that we administer and other agencies administered would call Tier 2. Tier 2 is the place that touches a lot of your communities. Those are things like forest health grants, the basin roundtables that consider our water future, aquatic nuisance species investigations and decontamination programs and other programs. This year, because of low severance tax, Tier 2 programs that I just talked about received zero new revenue from severance tax, and instead they spent their time spending down existing fund balances. That resulted in less work on the ground in the communities that you all live in. But the General Assembly did two things just in the last week or two that will result in full funding of Tier 2 programs in the next year. First, they voted to release the $10 million that was held in last year's bill, Senate Bill 218, that was held to be partial repayment to the general fund for deductions being claimed under the new property tax or new severance tax deduction in the BP decision that I mentioned earlier. And then second, they transferred an additional $10 million from general fund to 3 priority DNR Tier 2 programs. Those are Species Conservation Trust Fund, which we administer to stave off federal listing and ensure protection of imperiled species, the Forest Health and Wildfire Mitigation grants that I mentioned, and then the Aquatic Nuisance Species program. So we're looking at full funding for those programs in the coming year. And some of that will make up for the fact that they got no new money this year. So again, I just want to sort of send the message that I guess about 6 months ago, I stood at the same podium in the same room and talked about severance tax to AGNC and the dire situation we were facing. And today it looks a lot different. And so we thank the General Assembly, obviously, for that. And I think it reflects the priority of these programs to the people of Colorado. So that's just severance tax. When we talk about declining oil and gas revenues or declining mineral revenues. I'm going to touch briefly on the Oil and Gas Commission's budget and declining mill levy revenues. Again, low prices equals declining revenue to the Oil and Gas Conservation and Environmental Response Fund. That's the primary source. About 60% of the OGCC's funding comes from mill levy, and the balance comes from severance tax Tier 1. The decline in price and the decrease in revenue from mill levy resulted in a $3 million shortfall in the current fiscal year. The General Assembly addressed that last year by giving OGCC a one-time shot of money from severance tax Tier 1, but that was just a one-time fix. The Oil and Gas Commission could raise the mill levy rate, although that's complicated by Tabor. And you can't raise cash fund revenue in a Tabor refund year, so that wasn't possible. And the Commission has been managing to its revenue over the last year by leaving about 10% of its positions vacant. And so it's been operating at about a 90% staffing level. And we've seen impacts on the programs as a result, with permit processing times increasing, for instance. So we proposed to the Joint Budget Committee that they refinance $1 million of severance tax, or in mill levy revenue with severance tax in the current year. And JBC's release of those funds just in the last week or so will make that possible. So again, I think the message I want to send is that we've faced some real budgetary challenges from declining mineral revenues, and we've worked with the General Assembly to have those addressed. And I keep telling Matt, help's on the way. So we think that that's the case going forward. So that's probably way more than you guys wanted to know on the budget issues that we deal with, but I know that it's a topic important to all of you as you balance your own budgets. And you also work closely with DOLA, the Department of Local Affairs, which administers the other 50 cents of every dollar that comes in on severance tax. So I just thought it might be interesting. So the second priority area that I'm going to talk about is implementation of Colorado's water plan. The water plan was delivered to the governor in November of last year. Actually, November of 2015. I keep forgetting that we're in 2017. And was intended to ensure sufficient water supplies to keep our cities, farms, and environment thriving, even as we're expected to grow. Colorado is the second fastest growing state in the nation. We added 111,000 residents in 2014, and that's projected to continue. So the water plan really articulates a set of shared values that came up from the Basin Roundtables for how we're going to meet our future water supply needs, and its implementation is going to unfold over many years, not just this year, although we continue to move forward on implementing the water plan. We've been studying more storage options, including groundwater storage technology. we've sought to secure funds for watershed restoration and stream management plans, and we're exploring ways to temporarily transfer agricultural water to meet municipal needs through, we call them alternative transfer mechanisms, but these are basically alternatives to the buy and dry of agriculture that we've seen so much of, especially on the Front Range. And then finally, we're updating the statewide water supply initiative, which looks out at our future water needs in the hopes that we get a reliable baseline for what our future is going to look like so that we can plan on how to meet that. All of that is being reflected in this year's water projects bill that's moving through the General Assembly here in the last 3 weeks of the session, but who's counting? The projects bill this year is the biggest one we've ever had. It's $164 million. That includes a $90 million loan for the Windy Gap firming project that will improve the reliability of water supplies for 13 Front Range communities. It's a $400 million project, so we're a big part of it, but it includes a new reservoir southwest of Loveland called Chimney Hollow. It also includes a $30 million loan guarantee fund that will allow CWCB, the Water Conservation Board, which is within DNR, to support regional water supply projects by homogenizing and basically evening out the credit ratings among participants, allowing smaller communities to participate in these bigger projects that have higher costs. And then finally, the projects bill includes $25 million to implement the water plan. That will include a $10 million supplement to the Water Supply Reserve Fund, which again didn't get any new revenue from Tier 2 severance tax this year. It'll include $5 million for watershed restoration plans and $10 million for funding the water plan implementation, including up to $3 million for storage, $1 million for long-term strategies for conservation and technical assistance and other matters. So. That bill is up in House Appropriations tomorrow. So again, that's House Bill 1248, the state's projects bill. Final piece I'm going to talk about, again, I said I'd talk about energy, water, and now wildlife, is another piece of legislation moving through, and that's House Bill 1321 to secure the long-term sustainability of Colorado Parks and Wildlife and its programs. So Colorado Parks and Wildlife is an enterprise agency. It doesn't receive any general fund, where it receives a very tiny bit to make up for the fact that we provide free park entrance to veterans in the month of August. So again, less than 0.1% of its budget comes from the general fund. 75% of the wildlife program's funding comes from the sale of hunting and fishing licenses. So that's a major revenue source. By 2023, we project to have a 20% budget shortfall due to increased costs and due to historic declines in the hunting population. And so we need to generate about $20 million to meet, to continue to do all the programs that we're doing today. And in order to restore some of the programs that we've cut over the last couple of years, we've defunded 50 positions within Parks and Wildlife. We've cut $40 million from its budget, and we've engaged in deferred maintenance of parks facilities, dam infrastructure, and other things. So today, resident hunting and fishing licenses have to be set and can only be changed by the General Assembly. And the last time that was done was in 2005. In that time, our purchasing power with those dollars has decreased by about 22%. And so our proposal is to give the Parks and Wildlife Commission the authority to increase resident hunting and fishing license fees up to a maximum of 50% cap on park fees and resident hunting license fees, a 50% cap on senior fishing licenses, and the ability to create, after a public process, a boat sticker to fund aquatic nuisance species. Again, this is an important program to inspect and decontaminate boats on our flatwater sites and ensure the continued ability to engage in flatwater recreation. Again, Colorado is a headwater state. All of our water flows out of Colorado. We're the only headwater state without aquatic nuisance species having taken hold in the state, and our inspection and decontamination program is an important part of that. It's today reliant on severance tax, and we want to create a dedicated funding source where boaters would fund that. And we engaged in 18 public meetings around the state over the last year to get feedback on that. If you haven't had enough, I could talk for a minute about the federal budget and what that is looking like. I'm full of good news today, right? No, so really, I mean, maybe I'll just share is that we at the state level are looking closely at President Trump's budget blueprint that was released a few weeks ago. And that is a huge proposal. It reflects $1.1 trillion in spending. But they are proposing a 12% reduction in the budget for the Interior Department. That's an agency with whom we partner frequently, and a 31% cut to the EPA. Again, that's an agency that we work with a lot. And so all I maybe want to share is that there's a lot of uncertainty about what the federal budget is going to do to programs here in Colorado. We get about $200,000 annually for our dam inspection program. And we're not sure how that could be cut. The blueprint says that line will be reduced or eliminated. And so again, uncertainty about $250,000 from the feds on that program. We also, through the Oil and Gas Commission, get about $100,000 annually from the EPA for its underground injection control program. We administer that program on behalf of the EPA, and the blueprint talks about reductions in some of those grants. So. Again, the message maybe I want to share is that this is something that we watch closely and we're concerned about without much certainty as to what the impacts are going to be. So that is the end of my prepared remarks. Thanks for listening, presumably. And I'm going to stick around and happy to answer questions both here during this panel and afterwards too. So thanks so much.